Hello. In this day and age, we can find computer chips nearly everywhere we look. Every item we look at has a computer chip nowadays. Computer chips are becoming more and more relevant in everything we do. Obvious items like cell phones, cameras, laptops, notebooks, tablets, all those items have computer chips built into them. Other not so obvious items we see around our home. Our homes are becoming more technologically up to speed. We've got computer chips in our refrigerators, our ovens. We have computer chips in the microwave, and even computer chips in the wall sockets. A lot of those computer chips will regulate the use of voltage and will trip if too much voltage goes through them. So we also have other areas that computer chips are used in, which we might be familiar with. Things like the military applications, where a lot of our guided missiles, guided bombs have computer chips in them to help guide them to their targets. Other things like the image sensors or the heat signature, where you check for someone's body heat through a camera, those are newer technologies that the military and police forces are using nowadays. The fascinating part about all these chips, which I'm sure none of you guys realized, is that they are built right here in Pocatello. We build those chips at ON Semiconductor, and my name is Kurt Marshall, and for the past 15 years, I have aided in the creation of billions of these computer chips. For the past 6 years, I have served as shift supervisor at the ON Semiconductor plant here in Pocatello, Idaho. And before that, I also served as a fab operator, where I actually helped build these computer chips. As a shift supervisor, I'm in charge of 50 operators at any one time, and I am also tasked with the challenge of removing bottlenecks that might impede our line flow. At the same time, I'm there to enforce policy where needed if we have violators of that policy. As an operator, a lot less responsibility, but what I did there was I just physically made these wafers. I would be in charge of multi-million-dollar tools, multi-million-dollar equipment, and we would make these discs, these wafers, and we would build computer chips on top of them. All of us are aware that these items contain computer chips, but none of us have any idea how they're really made. Maybe you have an idea, but a lot of us think it's either rocket science or magic, how these things are made. I'm going to try to dispel some of that magic, try to explain some of that rocket science, and give you a basic understanding of how a semiconductor computer chip is made. So let's start from the very beginning. The computer chip is made from an element called silicon. Silicon is a very abundant element found on Earth. Through a refining process, which you can see here, the sand is heated up and turned into large ingots, which will then be sliced into discs. From here, the discs will be brought into the fabrication environment, also known as a clean room. This is an example of a clean room. The clean room, you can see the operators are in suits, not to protect themselves, but to protect the wafers. The clean room environment is actually 1,000 times cleaner than an operating room in a hospital. The reason for the cleanliness is due to the microscopic level of which these computer chips are made at. The human hair, as you can see here, is roughly 75 microns. A computer chip part right now is either a 0.18 micron or smaller, which you can see this tiny dot here. That's how small we're making some of the computer chip parts. If a human hair landed onto that wafer, that entire disc would be destroyed, and we would lose the product on top of it. So now that you understand how the discs are created, I'm going to get into the process of how we make a fully functioning computer chip. The creation of a semiconductor computer chip is a slow process that involves chemicals, different other processes that can take weeks at a time, but what we're doing is essentially we're stacking layer upon layer to make the computer chip work. The first part of the process is the thermal oxidation. We'll actually take these wafers here, these discs, and we'll put them into a very, very hot furnace. The furnace type machine will grow this layer of thermal oxidation at temperatures of over 1,000 degrees centigrade. This gives the gate layer a protective barrier from the substrate or the silicon. As you can see here, here would be the disc, would be the substrate. The gate layer that we're growing at the thermal oxidation, this is where we're going to start building the chip on top of. This, imagine, is a plate. and this is where we're going to build from now. After this, we go to a process called photolithography. This uses a chemical very similar to an old analog camera, which we're going to place a photosensitive reactive chemical on top of the wafer. And then we're going to expose it with an image. The chemical is placed onto the disc, it goes into the machine, into the tool, and a bright light is shined through this, what is called a mask. It's an image that will be reflected into the lens, and then it'll be shrunk down microscopically onto that wafer. After it leaves the lithography area and gets exposed, we then take it to an area that we call the implantation area, where the wafer, this is a small section of it, but this is where the wafer will be bombarded with positive or negative ions, depending on the recipe, and that will positively or negatively charge that part of the wafer. After that, we do a metallization, where we place metal on the wafers. Different layers of metal, as you can see from this picture. We connect a metal 6, metal 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 onto the wafer, and each one of these layers are interconnected to each other to allow the flow of electricity from top to bottom of the wafer. This is very similar to creating a lasagna. If you make a lasagna, you know you start with the bottom layer of noodle, you go into the meat sauce, cheese, another layer of noodle, sauce, meat, cheese, and you keep repeating that until it's done. Building a wafer is very, very similar to that, although not that basic. So now that I've explained how the chips are made, I'm going to explain to you how the computer chips are taken off that disk. So when the process is complete, this is a view of a completed wafer, a completed disk. They will use saws to strategically cut out each one of those chips. Now those saws very carefully cut the chips out. The chips can vary in size to very, very tiny to very, very large. It all depends on the part that we are making for the customer. Once it's been cut out, it'll be placed into a more familiar casing that you guys might be familiar with. If you see here, here's a plastic casing. Inside that black plastic casing is the actual chip we made. The metal pieces that are coming out are leads that will connect to the chip, which will allow the conductivity of electricity. That'll then in turn connect to the circuit board. The final process is what brings these chips to life. This is what helps or hurts, depends on your position, improving the quality of life for us. So I just explained the basics of building a computer chip in 3 different sections. The first section was the buildup of the medium at which we're going to start the computer chip from, the silicon wafer. Second, I explained the buildup of the wafer from start to finish. Finally, I explained how we cut them up and make them into usable parts that consumers will buy inside of their devices. This may seem like rocket science, and to a point it really kind of is. But I bet most of you didn't realize that we do this here in a small town like Pocatello, Idaho. Thank you for your time.